So after I put out my advanced quick grass quick tip, I took a closer look at Andrew Price's Grass Essentials, and I realized that they had generated a lot of their stuff using some plugins for 3ds Max, which I'm not going to spend the hundreds of dollars for, because obviously I am not selling stuff. However, when he released it, the way he described it made me think that it could be duplicated, and someone asked, well, couldn't you just use the tree generator to do something similar to this? And he said, well, I never could really get very good results using that. And so I thought, well, he's probably right. He probably did a lot of experimentation. However, I've done a lot of experimentation, and using the tree generator, I've created what I believe to be fairly decent looking grass. The only issues I've got is I haven't perfected my lighting, and I haven't perfected the system of getting the color right. So having the right colors, you know, the burnt top, the nice grassy green, and then like the root brown. I haven't quite got that down yet. I've tried a few different ways, and I'm going to show you all this. This isn't going to be a full tutorial, not yet anyways, until I perfect it, but I kind of wanted to show you guys how I've done this and the kind of trick I figured out to making this, and how you can kind of create your own asset of grass the same way Andrew has for his Grass Essentials in your free time. That was kind of my whole idea behind this. So he did release some free stuff. Now I haven't had time to go over it yet. I'm definitely going to compare it, but I want to show you how I got this result basically. So what we have here is just a simple particle system emitting a group of meshes, and so this is just a custom pick group. So I've just selected how many of each type it should have in here. Then on this layer we have, it's a little bit slow. He said that his rendered very fast. Mine renders very slow. I haven't quite figured that out either. Just to do 10 samples to get Blender to respond here takes quite a while. Anyways, this is just a random pick group. So this is Blender just picking all of them at random from the group. And you can see I added an area light here to try to improve the lighting a little bit. But the grass, you can see, is a little bit too reflective, especially my wheat style grass. And then the last one is just a single bladed group. Again, once it renders out, I don't know why it's quite slow, which is odd. I mean, I only have 500 particles in here, and they're duplicates. I mean, it's only using 16 megs of RAM for all of this, and so this is just single blades of grass. However, I think their size is way too big. Their scale's wrong, but yeah. So this one just takes the single blade object and emits it. So basically, how this was made is, whoops, wrong layer again. Let me get out of this. Let me go to solid mode. We don't need this. Material mode will work. Alright, so what I did, now these are scaled up, I believe 10 times. I'm just going to clear this render border. So yeah, all I've done is use the sapling generator, to generate these bits of grass. So it started off with this one right here, which you can see how it can come from a tree. It's just basically a trunk that branches off with some branches and no leaves. And now another problem with Andrew's grass pack, and I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not trying to say it's bad or anything, and I'm greater than him. It's just an issue that he noted and was noted is that you can't animate his grass. It's not animatable. However, since the sapling generator lets you add armatures and lets you add wind and stuff to this, you could technically, if you had the processing power and time, you could animate your grass completely. In fact, we could we could animate it fully, looking like it's blowing in the wind. Again, if we had the time and processing power. I haven't perfected this. I've only been playing with it for a couple days, but and I haven't tested animations yet, but I know it can be done easily, and I'll note to that once we get into how I've done this. So yeah, it started out with this one. And I thought, hey, that looked pretty cool. That looks like an actual stalk of grass. And so I was quite happy with that. And then I decided to make, I accidentally made a kind of piece of wheat, and I reproduced it here this morning. So you get that style. I'm sure, I don't know, I live in Canada. This is the types of grass that I see. So these two pieces of grass here would be like the kind you just kind of find on the roadside or by a sidewalk, just the random growing natural grass. So I created that kind of wheatgrass, and then I created this one, which didn't work out as I intended. It was supposed to kind of be like a clump of regular grass, but in the style of the kind of stalk with a mix. It was kind of supposed to be a mix of everything, but it kind of just looks like I don't know, an alien hand or something. So I don't really like that one as much. But then I went on to make a single blade, which if you look at it carefully is really just a really, let me go into wireframe mode. It's just a very, very narrow, what do you call those? Parallelograms, which ends at a single vertice. So it's really, because most blades of grass that you see in renders from a distance at least are just a single plane that narrows to a point, so 4 vertices, and this just extends it a little. It makes it full 3D. So that's what that was. And then I decided that I could take that, and this was all created using the sapling generator. So then I used that to create this clump of grass. So I just duplicated a bunch of times at different angles, and and so the great thing about this is that all of these use very, very small amounts of polygons. So all 5 of these objects only have 9,000 triangles, and if you're using it in Blender, if you're not worried about tries, it's really only 4,000 faces. Also, these are at full high poly detail. You can take, let's take, I was practicing with it the first day when I was starting this. Take the what do I call it? The stock field type grass here. If we go to the modifiers panel and add a decimate modifier, we can it's 3,000 faces to start with, but we can collapse it down to, I found it about just over 500 before it starts getting artifacting. Yeah, about right there, 700, but I was able to get it to about 590. I thought was pretty reasonable before those 2 little bits run off. Yeah, about 540. So you can cut that down immensely from 3,000 to 500 faces with really no loss in, there's no lighting in this layer, but in really no loss of detail. I mean, the difference between that and that is completely unnoticeable. I mean, once you decimate it all the way, yes, but you can really even go further. I mean, we could take it down to the absolute minimum. You could take it down to 370 faces, so almost a 10-to-1 reduction, and have it look just fine. Now, obviously, this really cuts down the geometry, but it works just fine. So yeah, you can improve performance. I haven't really tested that too much to see if it would make the rendering faster. I don't know how Andrew achieved his rendering so fast, because he did the exact same thing. He just got meshes that were, I guess, generated in 3ds Max with a plugin, and then he just used some sort of emission system. Again, I haven't really I haven't looked too much at his stuff. Anyway, so how did I create this? So I'm gonna save this, all my work. We'll come back to it. I'm just gonna open up a new Blender instance actually. So just first thing to do is to enable the sapling generator. It's in trunk, so it's available to every Blender user. All you got to do is search up sapling and add-ons and add curve sapling. So you can see it adds a parametric tree, blah 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 blah. It's been around forever. It hasn't been updated in a while, I believe. So, but it's still a great plugin. So anyways, all I did then is we go Shift A and we add a curve tree. And at first you get what looks like a tree. And obviously that's not going to get you the grass you want. So open up your T panel for the operator panel, your T toolbar. I do like to use the floating toolbar, but I'm trying to make it so you guys can see this here. So we'll make it nice and big, and I will go through the settings. I saved the settings down. I also saved some presets, so you can see I have my wheat as a preset. I had another one I saved it as preset. It must not have saved, but essentially once you get a mesh you like out of the sapling generator, you can save it as a preset, and then you can go and make variations on it later. So you can make a group of, say, 30 different types of grass to really add some variation. So let me show you the settings I used to create that original stalk of grass, that the best looking one. So obviously we need to enable bevel, and I turn the bevel resolution up at least 2. You can see it adds some polys, but it makes it look much better. A bevel resolution of 0 is just a square, and it just gets rounder and rounder. So I chose 4 the first time, and the curve resolution the same. Now vector and auto handles, auto, as you can see, makes more than triple in this case the number of polys, and I'm not entirely sure why, so I've stuck to vector because it really doesn't make a huge difference in the overall look. So anyways, on to the actual settings. The shape I chose is cylindrical for all of my grass. Let me just look at my notes here quickly. So yeah, bevel, both resolutions above 2, handle type vector, shape cylindrical, the ratio 0.01, yep. Oh, and you can also always change the seed to get a different one every time, right? So you can add variation at any time once you have a preset. The scale, however, we need to bring down to 1 with a scale variation of 1. Scale radius of 0.75. Whoops. And the scale radius variation of 1. So now we have to zoom in because it got a lot smaller. It's the same tree basically. How come I can't zoom in as far as I normally can? There we go. So it's basically the same tree, just smaller, but we're going to fix that in a minute. So on to the next level, branch splitting. Now, we only need 2 levels. If we add a 3rd level, then it really becomes a tree because you get all those extra branches. That's entirely ungrass-like. Maybe you could use this for a brush. I don't know. I haven't tested that yet. I've only been using it to make grass blades, but we only need 2 levels of branch splitting. Base splitting, you can crank this up to get that look that it's splitting off, as you'll see some grass blades have splitting like that or like that, I found. So I believe level, let me see, yeah, base splits 1, and yeah, only levels of 2 since we're not actually making a tree. And the base size I used 0.1. So that brings our branches, if you will, down to the bottom nearly. You can bring it down all the way to the ground. It's a preference. You can see how that works. But I found 0.10 worked good. Now, since we're only using the first two levels, you only have to worry about the first two values. The rest you can ignore. You can see I can set them to 0 and it changes nothing. So you only have to worry about the first two values in any of these things from here on. So I copied down all the values here. So it was 0 and then 10 for the second value. So you can see how we just get a few little segments coming off, and that's the basic shape right there essentially, but we're gonna work further on it. I believe the rest really didn't change much. We're under branch splitting, branches 0, 10, 0, 0, split angle 0, and then I put 0.6, I believe. Yeah, 0.6. 0, 0, down angle, I put 0, because it doesn't matter, and then 35, yep. So that kind of brings them closer a little bit. Again, you can play with that depending on your look, but we're gonna get that effect regardless a little bit sooner. So I found 35 look nice with a, well, anyways, we'll stick here. Rotate angle, I left at stock, and you can play with this rotate angle. Just if I stick it at 0, you'll see they all come out basically all the same way. Like you can see from top view without perspective, they all basically just come out, and you see if I rotate the angle around, how they rotate around. So the stock value of 140, I found works just fine. I'm not going to worry too much about it. You can play with it, but it's not going to really make a visual difference. So yeah, that I set to 140. Now the branch radius ratio, I changed to 0.5. That just gives us thicker branches, stalks, whatever you want to call them now. And so that is, well, let me check here. Down angle variation 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, negative 50. Yep, 0, 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, yeah. All right, so on to the next one, branch growth. So the, again, only the first two values will matter since we only have two levels. The trunk starting angle, let me just see here, I wrote all these down. 0, vertical attraction, yep, that's fine. Length of 1, that's basically just the size. 1 and then 1/4, and like I said, the other values don't matter. Is it 0, 0? Curvature, this is where it really affects some stuff. Where am I at here? Length 1/4, 0, 0. Curvature 0. This one I turned to 45, so you can see how that really affects it from where it was before at negative 40 or whatever to 45. Now it gives us that kind of that really makes it look less like a tree and more like grass. And then again, the other values don't matter, so 0, 0. And back curvature, I believe I adjusted too. Yep, I gave it a little bit of back curvature, so 12.5 on the second level, so on the little stalks. So that just you can see the effect right here if I bring it back down to 0. At 0 it sits right around there, but when I bring it up to 12, it just makes it look like gravity's acting on it more. And if we look at it from the top again, you'll see, or maybe from a certain angle, you can really see how it affects it. Oh, it's not curvature, back curvature. It makes it curly on the tips basically. So yeah, I found 12.5 is a good value. made it look very realistic. I compared this to a piece of grass, but it's winter here in Canada, so I just had dead grass to really, dead and frozen grass to play with. I think a higher value might even look better, something like 45 again, you know, make it kind of have that droopy look, you know, somewhere in there anyways. And then let's see, these are variations. Did I adjust them? Nope. 0, 0, 0, 0. Curvature variation 20, 50. So no, I left that alone. 0, 0. Taper, we want to leave it 1. Yeah, 1, 1. And these two don't matter. What the taper does, if you turn this down, it just turns it into tubes. So that's why you obviously want it at 0.99 or 1. The curve resolution just affects how much, you can see how it really affects the polys at the top. Just affects obviously the resolution of the curve. I think I just left it pretty stock. It depends on how high poly you want it to be. I like it to be high poly and then use the Decimate modifier later to essentially re-topologize it. Basically using the Decimate modifier. So I like to start out high poly, obviously. So I think, what did I use? I used 3, 6. So yeah, I just upped it a little bit for the second level, just to give them a little bit better, little smoother curve. You could even go up a little higher. And then the first level doesn't matter too much because it's, well, you need at least 2, but because basically they're fairly straight. They really aren't that curved at all. You can see bumping it up really doesn't do anything. So that's why I just kept it at level 3. So yeah, then I think that's basically it. Yeah, that's it, because obviously we don't need pruning. We don't need to prune our grass. Leaves, I was thinking about this. You could probably, if you were using this to make brushes, and I haven't tested this out for that yet, but you could use this to obviously add flower textures on there. However, I would rather just have a simple medium poly modeled flower, the same way Andrew did it, I believe. However, that's a very, not terribly difficult, but it's a tedious thing to model. So you could, from a distance, if you just added a nice alpha, a texture of a flower with an alpha layer, that would look good from a distance if you wanted to add little things to something. I don't know, but anyways, so yeah, that. And then the armature, if you did want to animate it, you can have it have an armature on it. See, does it put it on there right away? Yeah, it puts an armature on there right away, and then you can even animate it, right, to have it blowing in the wind. So essentially it's just a tiny tree, so it's animatable. But I haven't played around with that yet, but I'm just saying it is there. So that is one plus. So essentially now you've got your first piece of grass in your collection. So what I would do is just save it as a preset. So I would just call this, what did I call it before? I just called it like basic stock field grass, and then export preset. And then it's available for you at any time, the same settings. And then if you wanted some variation, again, you just go and you say adjust a little bit. Maybe you want a bigger one, or maybe you want to adjust the curvature for some really willow grass or something, right? Or whatever. You can adjust it from there, but you get that same basic shape. So that's all I did, is I did that, and then I just made another one that was a little different, another one that was a little different, another one that was a little different. For the single blade of grass, I'll just show you this very quickly, and before we get into the rest of the steps quick, I just added the same thing, add a tree. I believe basically nothing mattered. I used the same settings. However, what I did under branch splitting is I only gave it one level, so that we just had a single trunk essentially. So I'll just give it a bevel, and I gave it a bevel resolution of 0. And so once, I'll close this off now. Once you're done with your curves, once you've generated them, then you just select them. I'm going to select both of them, and you go Object, Convert to Mesh from Curve / Meta / Serve / Text. So now we get an actual mesh. If we tab into Edit mode, you can see the geometry there. So to make the single blade of grass, before we get into the node group and the materials, all I did was, it's, as you can see, it's just a cube basically that's extruded up that ends in 4 triangles pointing towards a single vertex. So you could essentially use the vertex to adjust the height, or there's 2 vertexes up there to adjust the height. But what I did was, down at the bottom, I just took the 2 vertexes here and I scaled them inwards to make a really narrow piece. And so that's how I got a single blade of grass look, just like that. And it's extremely low poly too. It's only got 24 tries and 12 faces. Anyways, on to the actual one. I'm gonna delete that one. So this one's got a bit more complicated geometry. You can see how the resolution affects the amount there. We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 levels of resolution on there. So yeah, that's basically that. So now we just need to create a material for it. Now this is where I really struggled, and it took me a long time to figure it out and test some stuff out. I still haven't perfected it, but essentially we set up a new material. I'll just call it grass.material. I can't spell. Grass.material, and then you go into the node editor, and I'm going to switch over to my other file to here, because I don't want to waste another 20 minutes going over this, because it's a little bit complicated. So let's use the one that I originally made. You can see how similar it is. Let me hide these. So this is the one that I originally made versus this is the one we just made really quickly. Quite similar. You can see there's hardly any difference between them, because I copied down the settings. Anyway, for the material, so all I did was added a material, and then in the node editor I brought in this setup. So let me try to explain. I'm gonna go full screen here, Alt F10. So just ignore the group outputs. That's just because this is a node group. In fact, I'll just delete them for now. We don't need them for showing this off, and I'll unhide everything. Yeah, that should work pretty good. So, and then this would go out to your material output. So let me just duplicate, or I'll just add a output material output, so it works like that in the end. So we have an add shader, which is used to get translucency because grass is slightly translucent, and so that's in the bottom. And in the top is a mix shader, which plugs into your standard diffuse and glossy shaders. And then we go into a hue saturation value node. So this allows us to just adjust the saturation and the value. So you can see here, I've just used it for saturation and value and not hue. Basically that just allows us to either make the grass less saturated if we want it to look more dead, more saturated if we want it to look more live, and lighter or darker if we, again, depending on what we need. So that just allows us to make some adjustments on the fly without having to go and play with our color ramp. So that's not needed. You could just plug the color ramp directly into the color outputs, but I added this in there so that I could add the adjustability. So yeah, the hue saturation node, it plugs into the diffuse shader and into the translucent shader. Now the translucent shader being plugged into there is very important. If you use a translucent shader just with the stock color of white, oh, I'm on HSV. you're gonna get white grass. So that's why it needs to have the exact same color as the diffuse shader. So anyways, our actual color ramp, you use a pretty standard color ramp that you would for grass, and so this takes some tweaking and it's a personal preference, and this one isn't perfect in my opinion. I've got a few different versions here, but basically it starts out at the bottom with that position 1 with a, or 0 I guess, with a root color, so you know, a dark brown, a blacky brown, and then your next layer, your next position would be kind of a brown, and then you get into your actual greens, a dark green, a slightly lighter green, and then here you would, I think I screwed this up, you would probably have more of a yellowish, and then at the top you kind of get that burnt look. Let me copy that color and turn the value up a little bit and maybe make this one more green, so you can see how we get that nice green gradient, and then it turns to a slightly unsaturated yellow to a kind of medium brown at the very tip, because grass gets burnt at the tip from getting cut and such, and in being directly in the sunlight with a little surface area. So that's how everyone does grass basically. However, the problem I ran into is how do you apply it so that the higher up the mesh you go, so the top of the grass gets these colors at the end, while the bottom of the mesh, the grass stalk, gets these lower colors. I really experimented with this, and so the easiest way I figured out was to simply put in a texture coordinates node, use the object data vector, put it into a separate XYZ node, vector to vector, and then take the Z node into the vector of a vector mapping node, and then obviously the vector into the factor level of the color ramp node. And then all I did was change the location of the Z. Now this will depend on the size and the scale of the grass that you created, but I just tweaked the Z values to get a nice gradient. And so in the end, if I go back, let's see here. In the end, you end up with that. You get the darker colors at the bottom and the lighter colors at the top. Again, remember, there's no lighting on this layer. However, I did come up with quite a few different ways of coming up with these. Let me show you a few different ones. I'll just delete this one. So I came up with a bunch of different ones. So let me check this one out. Yeah, so this one used some advanced, not advanced, but some math. So I kind of laid this one out. So it works the same way. We just have our basic add shader with translucency, our mix shader with our diffuse and glossy, pretty basic. And then it runs into a, again, ignore the inputs and output. Then it just runs into a color ramp. You can see here how I've done it a little bit better. You have the root, then the grass, then the burnt tip. So this time I did some more research, and the way we could do it also is basically to get the details of the mesh, we take geometry position info and object location info. We put it into the two vector inputs of a which one is it? A vector transfer? No, a vector curves? No, which one? It's that I rarely use this. I can't remember which one it is. In here somewhere. because before we used particle info, or no, before we used hair info, because typically when you make grass in Blender, you use a hair emitter particle system, and you can just use the intercept directly into your color ramp to get you perfect looking grass colors. But that's not possible using this method of using meshes, so we had to come up with a different way. Now what the heck is this? It's maybe some type of math. Vector math, that's right. Okay, yeah. So we add two vector math nodes actually. So the first one is a subtraction. So we subtract the position and the location of the object in the geometry. And then we take that vector output into both of the vector inputs of a dot product. And we don't take that vector, rather we take that value, because the color ramp factor works on a value. A value of 1 would give us the color right here, a value of 0.5 would give us the color right in the middle, and a value of 0 would give us a color right at the end. That's how that works. So that's how you want to get that nice gradient. So we do the dot product value, and then we start doing math on it. So we use power, power, and let me get rid of these, and then a value that we can adjust, and then we take that overall value into a multiply, and these are two math nodes, so a power and a multiply with a value that's adjustable, into another value that finally goes into our color ramp factor. And so basically these two values here let you tweak it, because each mesh is going to need different values to get the gradient. It's not going to work. Basically, the higher the mesh, the different values you're going to need. And so basically through some experimentation, the power basically blends the gradient, so it makes it much smoother, kind of like the color ramp here. So a decent value gives us something like this, but if you say turn the value way up or way down, one of the ways, it turns into something like that, a very, very harsh, or even just one color, since we're just working with values. So if you turn it way up, you're gonna give an output that gets you a very high number, which you obviously don't want, because anything under 0 and above 1 gives you a color outside the range of your color ramp. So that's why these need to be tweaked in very, very, very small increments, holding down shift or even smaller. So it needs to be tweaked quite sensitively. And then the multiply value basically is the size of the gradient. So that sets how, the bigger the mesh, the more you need to set the multiplication value. And you can see this. Will this work now that I've deleted all this junk? Let's see if I can still have it work. This one is called the color based on height shader, so it's grass stalk shader. So let's apply it to this. Yeah, grass stalk shader. So you can see how already, just by me playing with those values, I've already ruined it essentially. But no output node, that would help to have one. We need an output, material output. There we go. We got our preview here. So let me show you how this works. So if we adjust the math, you'll see how it, just watch the preview so you can see how that's kind of like this, the size of the gradient. You'll see if I turn it up, it makes it bigger and smaller. So a nice value gets you obviously all the colors that you want. However, the multiply value, you'll see if I change it, I didn't want to go into the negative, sorry. It plays around with it too. So it softens it up. So multiply softens your gradient, and the power math node is like the size of it. I might have got those reversed when I set this up. Yeah, power is the size and the multiply blends it. I think, I don't know, I confuse myself sometimes. So now if we go to 3D view, you can see how that affects our plant. You can see that it needs more adjustment. You can see that obviously we're only getting our colors up to the very, very bottom of it, so it obviously needs a lot more adjustment. But in the end, that worked quite decently. However, I came up with a few other ideas. Let me see if I can bring them up here. So that's color based on height. I also had grass regular shader. That was the one we looked at. Yep. Grass stock. This was the original one that I showed you, just with generated into the factor. However, I found that object into the factor can work too sometimes. We had grass stock shader. This one, yeah, that's the one we just looked at. And the wheat style shader, that one's no different. There was one here that I had somewhere. Maybe I lost it. But I had multiple ways of doing it. Let's see if it's maybe just a different material. There it is. Yeah, so there was a few different ways to do it. So there was this way I just showed you, where we can use the object or generate coordinates into a mapping node. I found this one on Blender Artist forums. Basically, this whole thing gets plugged into your color ramp node, so it uses all this math and a gradient texture, because obviously we want a gradient from bottom to top, but I found it didn't work. However, I thought that using the math that we used in the ultimate one that did work the best, possibly putting that in there somewhere somehow would work, but I haven't tried that out yet. But yeah, I had a few different ways of possibly doing that, but overall it seemed that this one worked the best. Kind of hard to see. I tried to space it out as best as possible, but so yeah, that is how I got that set up. And in the end, I think with enough time, like I said, this is basically how to make your own grass essentials in your free time. And so yeah, with enough time, I believe you could make something very, very convincing. Now lost my scene here. If you ask me, it looks like fairly realistic grass. Because all those these all look like regular grass to me. So yeah, that is about that. Any questions, just let me know. It is a fairly complicated process, but essentially it's the way Andrew made his grass essentials. It's just a basic. It's a part of how he made it, with just a bunch of meshes put together. But I thought instead of modeling them manually that you could use some plugin for it. And yeah, the sapling generator, even though he said it didn't give him good results, I agree these aren't perfect results, but hey, that looks like a wheat stalk to me, and hey, that looks like a nice little grass stalk to me, like he was showing in his videos. So I was quite happy with that. So yeah, this is what I've just been playing with the last couple days. So hopefully this gives you guys some more ideas and maybe some inspiration for creating some decent grass in Blender instead of modeling individual blades or just using simple textures. Maybe now you can use actual 3D grass and you can animate it too, which is great. So hopefully this helped you in some way. This ended up being a lot longer than I intended, and a full tutorial would probably be a couple hours, but I think I've gone through everything. So anyways, thanks again for watching from the team here at BlenderTek.com. If you enjoyed this video and learned something about grass, particle systems, nodes, anything at all, consider liking it and consider subscribing for more videos. We're on Twitter at twitter.com/blender_tech and Facebook at facebook.com/blenderstech page, all one word. If you dislike this video for some reason, instead of just leaving with a thumbs down, please leave us a comment so that we can continually improve our videos based on your community input. We also take requests for tutorials and call for help. So if you want to see something, or if you're having problems with something, just let us know and we'll make a video up for you if time permits. So we will see you next time, and remember, create your way.